And yes, and about this controversy now, I want to have a proper intellectual discussion with you. This intellectual discussion, you see, it will not be a one-sided conversation. I want to engage you. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to everyone. I want to have a sort of a communal, a common consensus about what this issue is. I want to try and educate you. I don't know if I can educate you correctly, but I can definitely inform your perspectives. I want you to form your own opinion. I want you to analyze this as a leader would analyze it, as a very informed civilian would analyze it. So, as we get into this debate, I want you to have an open mind. So, you see, the first thing that we must do if you want to have an open mind is we have already been told. Everybody has told us, we have heard about this, we've read about it. Uniform Civil Code hona chahiye. Uniform Civil Code is something which is recommended. What is the Uniform Civil Code, etc.? I'll tell you. But I am suggesting that for the time being, we should be open-minded and appreciate the complexity of this debate. अगर इतना इजी है और अगर सब लोग अग्री करते हैं कि यूनिफॉर्म सिविल कोड होना चाहिए तो अभी तक क्यों नहीं हुआ? Why has it not occurred so far? There are obviously complexities in it. It is in the understanding of these complexities that you become more prepared, that you become better informed, that you become wiser, and that you can actually are eligible and qualified to have an opinion on issues such as this. Because you see, everybody can have opinions, but it is not easy to have correctly informed opinions, especially about complicated topics. What is the Uniform Civil Code? I'll tell you briefly, just for context, just in case many people do not know. It is, you see, it calls for the formulation of one law for India. That is the fundamental idea behind it. It is one country, it is one nation. एक law होना चाहिए. सब citizens का parity होना चाहिए. There should be rule of law. Rule of law is a concept also that you will learn in polity. Regularly आप polity में rule of law समझेंगे. Rule of law you will also, you have to appreciate the idea of rule of law as UPSC aspirants, as informed citizens, because this is one of the fundamental tenets of good governance. Good governance. जब आप job में जाएंगे, when you want to go into the law, into the practice, into the services, what you are expected to do is good governance, rule of law. उसका मतलब ही ये होता है कि the law is completely impartial, right? And the law does not discriminate. तो ये rule of law एक fundamental idea है modern governance का. ये it's a liberal idea which is now the de facto principle on which all governments work. और ये जो idea है rule of law का, it is fundamentally also embedded in our constitution. The Uniform Civil Code is a manifestation. ये इस idea की एक manifestation है. It calls for the formulation of one law. That means which would be applicable to all religious communities in matters such as, now this is important, marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoption. मैरिज, डाइवोर्स, इनहेरिटेंस, अडॉप्शन, ये तीन चार फंडामेंटल आइडियाज हैं जिन आइडियाज को यूज करके या जिन आइडियाज के फ्रेमवर्क के बेसिस पे हम बहुत सारे डिसीजंस लेते हैं लाइफ के. पर्सनल है ये. व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू गेट एट इज दैट देयर आर पर्सनल लॉज एंड देन देयर आर यूनिवर्सल लॉज. पर्सनल लॉज आर लॉज that a certain group of people based on their religion, caste or faith, made after due consideration of customs or religious texts, they use. This is different from criminal law. Criminal law is applicable to all citizens uniformly. चाहे जो भी हो. You see, a criminal law will be applicable to everyone. Like for instance, there is a blanket general rule about child marriage. You know this. There is a blanket general rule about also underage marriages, child marriages, child labor. Here there is no distinction between religious or personal laws. जो rule है वो सबके लिए. But you see what happens is when you look at the details, some things start to appear. कुछ important patterns आते हैं. These are the patterns we need to understand. Now, Article 25 to 28 of the Constitution guarantees religious freedom to Indian citizens. This is the beginning of the controversy. This is the crux. This is the legal genesis of this whole debate. Constitution में contradiction है. There appears to be a contradiction in the Constitution itself. The contradiction is, on the one hand, the Constitution itself in Article 25 to 28 guarantees religious freedom to Indian citizens, right? It guarantees religious freedom to Indian citizens. And it also says in Article 44 that the state should endeavor to bring a uniform civil code. अगर सब religions के लिए एक uniform civil code होगा, then how is it possible that they are able to also simultaneously somehow follow their own individual practices? तो हो नहीं सकता ना, because obviously either you can have one or the other. That is the issue. That is the legal issue. The Constitution has given precedence to fundamental rights. Fundamental rights. And of course, you are all very smart people. ये तो basic चीजें हैं, आपको पता है, नहीं पता है तो थोड़ी देर में पता चल जाएगी. What are fundamental rights? क्या, what thing makes them fundamental? What thing makes them fundamental? What makes them fundamental is that they are inalienable. You can approach the courts directly if anybody violates them. They are enshrined in the Constitution itself. They are virtually impossible or extremely hard to amend. They are fundamentals, which no government may impinge upon. But at times, there are exceptions. On the one hand, you have those, and on the other hand, you have directive principles of state policy, DPSP. DPSP is a very interesting feature of our Constitution. Directive principles of state policy are directions. Directions like a user manual. In order to run a country, what should be the aim of the government? What should the government aim to do? This is, I know, very laymanish and a commonsensical conversation, but I will build up to something. I will build up to something, and don't worry, the SWOT test will open. The SWOT test will open because there was an issue with the Gmail. It has been fixed. You will be able to submit it. Don't worry. And you can have 1 day extension for it. No issue. The Uniform Civil Code. Interestingly, you see, the person who has had a major impact on this idea at the time our constitution was being framed is Dr. Ambedkar. And I'm going to quote him. Dr. Ambedkar in his speech said, "No one need be apprehensive that if the state has the power, the state will immediately proceed to execute. That power in a manner may be found to be objectionable by the Muslims or by the Christians or by any community. I think it would be a mad government if it did so." कहने का मतलब ये था, initially, when this idea was proposed in the directive principles of state policy, the country was not ready. India was not ready because there was a lot of religious insecurity. Yes, Rajbir, and we will discuss Chandrayaan 3. Of course, it's a big deal. The climax of my talk here is going to be Chandrayaan 3, you'll see. And it has got a lot to do with our debate today. It has a lot to do with this idea of the Uniform Civil Code. It has a lot to do with identity. But we'll get to that. I have explained to you a few ideas. Although I explained them in a flow, I will structure it and make it easier for you to digest. I have said something about the Uniform Civil Code. I have said something about the legal genesis. Legal genesis इसका Constitution के अंदर ही है. Article 25-28 versus Article 44. ये दोनों अलग contradictory चीजें बोलते हैं. ये दोनों. अब which one should take precedence or not? Ultimately will get decided by the Supreme Court and by various governments, and so it's a long, complicated process. Why is it complicated? You know, the first question I asked you when we started talking about this, if it is so welcome, if it is so, the appeal is so instinctive that we instinctively say, yes, Uniform Civil Code should be there, then why hasn't it been implemented so far? What has been the issue? The issue is that this is a democracy and things take time. Consensus is not easy to find. Whenever you do something, there is something or the other, which makes it hard. You see, there are complications. There is another complication associated with it. That complication is, can the state interfere with individual? Can the state interfere with individual lives? That is a fundamental question. I want to take you through the preamble and I want to show you some of the ideas that are mentioned here. And I want to ask you to analyze if some of them are contradictory. And let us see, क्या हम इन abstract ideas को, can we bring them down to common sense? Can we appreciate them? Can we see, जब ये ideas हम पढ़ते हैं theoretically, जब actually में applicable होते हैं, when actually they are applied, what happens? What are the complications which arise? We'll get to that. But first, let's see what it says. Take a look, take a read, spend a minute, and I'll read it alongside you. It says, "We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity." assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation in our Constituent Assembly on the 26th day of November 1949, do hereby enact and give it to us as a constitution. Interesting thing it does. It talks about two types of things. It is saying that one, it is India is secular, but then on the other hand, it also says something here in the second last line. Second last line, देखिए. Second last line is saying what? Assuring the dignity of the individual and the unit and integrity of the nation. अब I don't know if you are aware, but ये जो this dignity of the individual and the fraternity और वो इंडिया को एक जो composite culture and that cohesive whole and our whole idea of Indian national identity and unity, that is also a fundamental aspect. Do you not think that there is a contradiction? That there is a contradiction. And yes, Kavita says that India is a secular state, but secularism के दो तीन मतलब होते हैं. The type of secular that India is, that we have adopted a stand wherein we believe that that all religions are equal. There is another type of secularism which is followed in other countries, which does not agree with this, which says that no religion, the state will not interfere, the state will be apathetic, not concerned with any religion whatsoever. The Indian constitution says the state will treat all religions equally. The state will treat all religions equally. Fraternity is to be achieved. The national integrity is to be achieved. But at the same time, fundamental rights are guaranteed. What to do about this? That is what the debate is about. Now, you see, the difference has been always bubbling. The fundamental cultural question is India ready for a universal set of code of laws? We have different cultures. You see, we have different religions, and different religions have different types of impacts on our lives. Until recently, the Hindu Succession Act and the Hindu Marriages Act had more or less an unequal distribution between men and female, men and women, especially the Inheritance Act. Boys and male heirs had more advantages and had better entitlement, and females were discriminated against in that rule, in that traditional set of laws. That was changed, and only recently it has come into real force, and that has a real impact. You see, the question is, which side do you hinge on? Do you hinge on the modern liberal side, or do you hinge on the side which supports the idea that tradition should be preserved and that individual autonomy can be eroded? अगर ये पूरे रूल्स ही हटा दिए जाएं और एक यूनिफॉर्म सेट ऑफ रूल जो सब पे लागू हो वो लगा दिया जाए, अब आइडिया सुनने में तो अच्छा लगता है, आइडिया समझने में भी ठीक लगता है, बट प्रैक्टिकली बहुत सारे इश्यूज हैं इसमें. Those are what we are trying to understand. But let me ask you a few questions. You have all had some basic training, कुछ तो पता ही होगा, बाकी नहीं पता है तो of course you will get to know very soon. Very fundamental question. In the preamble, the word secular is added. Which constitution amendment added this word secular? It's a very basic question just to get your brains jogging. Which constitutional amendment added the word secular in the Indian Constitution? And during what context was it added? If you can tell me that, that would be phenomenal. Although I know that many of you know this, and I would not be surprised when you do answer it correctly. Yeah, of course. Sayyam has got it first. It was the 42nd Amendment Act, and it was in 1976, correct? And it was at the time that emergency was imposed. Emergency imposed हुई थी India में. Now, a little bit of a background about what we are dealing with. When you talk about India India being secular, ultimately the whole question is about the word secular is the whole issue. And whether you hinge on one side or the other depends on what you think about this. India is a secular nation. That means a separation of religion and state, right? However, secularism is in India, as I mentioned, means that there should be equality of all religions. Practitioners of all religions under the law should be treated the same. Currently, with a mix of different civil codes, you have a different civil code for Muslims, which is partially according to Sharia law. You have a different code for Parsi. You have a different code, and may have very different codes for tribals. तो यहाँ पे बहुत अलग-अलग टाइप के पर्सनल लॉज अभी भी हैं हमारे कंट्री में. What The rights of Hindu women are far more progressive than that of Muslim women, who are governed by Muslim personal law, which is based on the Sharia law. Now, women rights group, जो women rights group हैं, उनका कहना है कि the issue of the Uniform Civil Code has got nothing to do with anything but the rights of women, gender equality, gender equality. अगर हम सब लोगों को equally treat करना है, and if everybody should be at par and everybody should have justice, social justice, how can there be social justice if they don't have equal opportunities? How can there be social or economic or any justice if they don't have equal entitlement under the law itself? अगर लॉ में ही वो एंटाइटलमेंट नहीं है, उनको बाहर कर दिया है, तो फिर कैसे हो सकता है वो? दैट इज द कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन which arises immediately from the preamble itself. Now, this is the argument of the critics of the Uniform Civil Code. They say it creates a threat to religious freedom. They consider the abolition of religious laws to be against secularism. They also think that it might be politically motivated. The real truth is that we will probably never know. We just have to use the information we have and form the best possible judgments. The counter argument to this is that Uniform Civil Code as a means of achieving religious equality and equal rights for women by fending off unfair religious laws. Now, legal experts and the human rights groups, they suggest that we should amend gender discriminatory laws rather than implementing a uniform civil code. And an example of such a law is the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, which applies to women communities without the need of a uniform code. So there might be a middle way. I don't know whether that is the wisest decision or the wisest policy to follow, but there is a possibility, right? There is a possibility. एक मिडिल पाथ पीस में हो सकता है कि जो जो डिस्क्रिमिनेटरी लॉज है सिर्फ उनको चेंज कर दिया जाए. Whether that is acceptable or not, even that we do not know. I'll just come to the crux of the situation and tell you my own opinions as much as I can. जितना मैं अपने personal opinions बता पाऊंगा, I will tell you, and I will expect that you form your own opinions about this idea. You see, there is tradition and there are vested interests, always, always. Tradition will come in contact with modernity. Tradition will always come in contact and with conflict with modernity. What we need to see is the contradiction and the conflict fruitful for us? Is it going to lead to something better? Does it lead to progress? Of course, whatever progress is, it depends upon the way you think about it. आपके different approaches हो सकते हैं progress को लेके. But by and large, at least as UPSC aspirants, this is what we need to talk about. Yes, Simran, you're right. And the triple तलाक केस, द शाह बानो केस ऑफ 1985, ये जो जितने भी इश्यूज हैं, अल्टीमेटली ये इश्यूज सिर्फ इसी को लेके हैं ना, कि हमको यही नहीं पता है इस डिबेट में. वी आर नॉट एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड, वी आर नॉट एबल टू मेक अप आवर माइंड्स कि ये डिबेट है किस चीज के बारे में. इज इट अबाउट जेंडर इक्वालिटी और इज इट अ पॉलिटिकल डिबेट? इज इट अबाउट रिलीजन्स काइंड ऑफ trying to hold on to their significance, religions trying to spread their influence, or is it about these modern liberal ideas? ये clear ही नहीं है. We do not know. This is the reason the debate is so hard to solve. We don't exactly know what this debate is about. We do know that it is confounded by a number of factors. एक और factor जो इसे complicate करता है, वो है tribal communities. अब tribal communities, they also have a fundamental right. And they have their own religious practices, their own different practices, and they have their own cultures, especially in the northeast of our country. In fact, a group of Nagaland want that if the UCC is implemented, then they will resort to violence. The Nagaland Transparency Public Rights Advocacy Organization, they oppose the idea of the UCC, saying that it will erode local customs. That is their concern. हमारे local customs जो हैं, हमारी identity जो है, वो धीरे धीरे डिस्पर्स हो जाएगी, वो खराब हो जाएगी, डाइल्यूट हो जाएगी. The Hyventrap Youth Council from Meghalaya also say that they will not support the Uniform Civil Code. It's a democracy. We have to listen to everybody. But then we have to decide what is right. And how do you decide what is right? And here is what I think. I think As people get more educated, as the economy grows, as we progress, as we send Chandrayaan 3, as we become more modernized, as we become more technology savvy, as these progresses started to happen, even if the progress is based on Western ideals, even if they are based on Western ideals, ultimately it leads to a situation where people stop thinking about religion so much. रिलीजन के बारे में हमारी जो जो इन्फ्लुएंस है हमारी लाइफ में वो धीरे धीरे खत्म होती है. इट टेंड्स टू डिक्रीज. ऑब्वियसली हर केस में नहीं होता है ऐसा. ज्यादातर एजुकेशन लेवल्स बढ़ते हैं, मॉडर्निटी बढ़ती है, साइंस बढ़ती है, तो रिलीजन की इन्फ्लुएंस कम होती है. तो इसीलिए दैट इज व्हाई यू सी रिलीजन्स, ऑर्गेनाइज्ड रिलीजन्स ऑल ओवर द वर्ल्ड आर अंडर डिक्लाइन. दे आर अंडर डिक्लाइन. A very big factor that will determine if India is available for this reform, ready for it, is socio-economic factor. This is not a debate about ideologies. This is a debate about the common man, whether they are ready, do they even understand what this is, how it will impact their lives. क्या वो इंटेलिजेंटली इन सब फैक्टर्स को इंडिविजुअली देख पा रहे हैं, एनालाइज कर पा रहे हैं, उनको पता है कि इस चीज का इम्पैक्ट क्या है या क्या नहीं है, ताकि वो इस चीज पे इंफॉर्म्ड डिसीजन ले सकें, ताकि वो मैनिपुलेट ना हो, ताकि उनको पता हो कि वो क्या कर रहे हैं. That is the fundamental issue. The more people get educated, the more they, progress towards these ideas, the better things become. The better things become, and the more, they tend towards these ideas. What I don't think they move away from religion. They just move closer to something else, it seems. They move closer to perhaps, I don't know, innovation, entrepreneurship, a more liberal minded idea, a lifestyle, even if it is not exactly our own homegrown idea. हमारे homegrown ideas, of course, India is the birthplace of many religions. India main religions हम हमारे यहाँ पे क्रिएट करे गए हैं. तो ट्रेडिशन और रिलीजन और हिस्ट्री बहुत लंबा हमारे पास एक इतिहास है, बहुत लंबा कल्चर है, बहुत बड़ी माइथोलॉजी है. हमारे हार्ट में, हमारे मन में रिलीजियस आइडेंटिटी या जो भी कम्युनल आइडेंटिटी वो है. But has it been mentally replaced by this other different identity now? Has it been replaced or become more important or less important than the identity of being an Indian? That is one. Has it become more or less important than being an Indian or an individual? हो सकता है you may not even identify as belonging to one religion or another. You may identify as being an Indian first. You may identify as being somebody else. So I think the great equalizer will be education. The great equalizer will be technology. Regardless of our personal laws and what we follow, we ultimately have access to the same information. Now that same information has spread, and the speed of its spread has faster than ever. What makes us ready or not ready is the extent to which technology and education has penetrated our minds. The extent to which these ideas, this vocabulary has penetrated our minds. The extent to which we can appreciate कि इस सब चीजों का हमारी लाइफ में क्या इम्पैक्ट है. When we become educated enough, informed enough to analyze the impact on us and then generalize this impact instead of being in our own domain, अगर हम सोच पाए that society क्या होगा इससे impact से, then we are educated to take a call on it. And as far as identities are concerned, ultimately, like I said, I think that this is a question of identities. Whether are you a Hindu? Are you a Muslim? Are you a man first? Or does that not matter? Perhaps you say that I'm an Indian first. Or maybe you think I am an individual first. What is it that you identify as the most? Where are you at home with your identity? That is the fundamental question it is about. I think whatever might be the division, whatever might be the debate, it is very clear that some part of our minds is inherently embedded in our national identity. There is a reason why we find this extremely fantastic. We think it's a huge achievement, and it is. It is a big deal. And it is very recent. Only a few minutes ago, Chandrayaan 3 has landed on the moon. It's a big deal. We were locked in a race with Russia, and they almost landed the probe, but their probe crashed, and India was able to land it. Now, the United States is sending a manned mission to the moon, but the point is that India is there now amongst the top 5. And this is, I think, the fundamental question. Just this is the message. I have given you only a broad overview. हमने बहुत एक broad overview की बात करी आज. हम बहुत ज़्यादा डिटेल में नहीं गए. हमने बहुत ज़्यादा इंटेलेक्चुअल बातें भी नहीं करी. I've given you just some of the ideas, just some general intellectual conversation about topics like these. मैंने इस topic को as a UPSC aspirant या as a UPSC mentor या teacher नहीं treat किया. I wanted to treat it as a civilian work. I wanted to talk about this debate, this question, because अगर हम हर topic को ऐसे holistically देखना start कर दें, if we are able to connect the polity with the socio-economic status and see the thing as it arises, we will have a much better understanding. This is what I think the UPSC is selecting for. They are not selecting for factual information. Obviously, that is one part of it. And I think that if we can have a mindset where we are able to understand and appreciate a topic in all these dimensions, like I said, अब हमने UCC के बहाने बहुत सारी conversations करी. हमने फंडामेंटल राइट्स के बारे में बात करी, हमने DPSP की बात करी, बहुत फ्री फ्लोइंग कॉन्वर्सेशन करी हमने. कहाँ पता चला है हमको इस कॉन्वर्सेशन में कि यहाँ पे पॉलिटी स्टार्ट हो रही थी या ये सोसाइटी का क्वेश्चन था कि ये लॉ का क्वेश्चन था. सब कुछ इंटरमिंगल्ड है. इट्स ऑल इंटरकनेक्टेड, इंटरडिसिप्लिनरी है. This is the way if we can adopt this type of thinking. And in order to adopt this type of thinking, I took this session and I spoke about this topic, and hopefully we will do more such sessions. But अभी बात खत्म नहीं हुई है. I have given you the basic, but I want you to spend some time on the research. I want you to form your own opinion. I want you to form your own opinion, and I want you to write a 500-word essay on this topic. UCC is either the best idea or the biggest mistake for India. And I want you to argue on both sides. I want you to be impartial. I want you to withhold your own judgments. आपके खुद के ओपिनियन, आपके खुद के जजमेंट्स अभी विदहोल्ड करके एनालाइज करना है इसको हमको काम माइंड से, और हमको सारे काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट्स एनालाइज करके एक कंक्लूजन पे पहुंचना है in no more than 500 words. In no more than 500 words, I will give you 24 hours, 48 hours you can take that. Whenever you watch this video, आप 48 hours के बाद भेज सकते हैं. You can send this to me on email. I will take a look. I do not promise I will read all of them. Not humanly possible sometimes for me. जितने पढ़ सकूंगा मैं पढ़ूंगा, and I will give you my comments about it. And maybe in another session we can actually discuss किसने ज़्यादा अच्छा लिखा है. That, my dear friends, and my all sorted, my intelligent audience that you are, is welcome to do this. Where to send, Ashish? You can send it to my email, and if you are in the free mentorship program, then you'll know my email is. Others will tell you my email, and you can respond to that. I hope that this was helpful. बहुत ज़्यादा, it was not a heavily loaded intellectual session, just a conversation. And I wanted to engage you in it. I wanted you to think about it, start to think about it. So I will see how well you have appreciated it after you write the essay. Thank you very much for coming to this short session. I will be seeing you on the weekend again with something very different and something that I've been planning for a while. Thank you very much and good night.